Okay, so Craig here's the director of Hustle and Flow and Black Snake Moan and the remake of Footloose. Why did you get on a plane, fly all the way from Memphis, Tennessee, just to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark in IMAX here in Austin? What is it about this movie that makes you have to go through security?
Right. It's probably like one of the most important movies to me in my life, especially with my dad, who's no longer around. He died of a heart attack at 49, kind of unexpectedly, and this was our movie. I think it is a very unique. I mean, my daughter loves it, but I can't help it. I think of it as a father-son rite of passage.
Right.
Like there's this moment where, and daughters, moms, I'm sure as well, but I can only speak to my own experience. And I have this really cool story about it, which is, everybody has their movie. Like Star Wars wasn't really like a movie to me. Star Wars, I was born in 71. It came out in 77, and so I was 6. So it wasn't a movie. It was just fantasy. It was something incredible that I went to go see. But Raiders was really that movie where I said, "Oh, like this is somebody made this. Mm-hmm. Like this is filmmaking." And so I had heard about Raiders at school, and kids were kind of talking about it. And I saw these commercials, and you may have seen these commercials. It was like, they were very mysterious. It would say like from the director of Jaws and Close Encounters and the producer of Star Wars and Empire, and I really didn't know what this was going to be, and so I finally went to go see it, and it blew my mind. And I remember going to school, and all my friends, they loved it, and it was my 10-year birthday party. And I had never had anybody over to my house for a birthday party. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had like family members, but I'd never had friends, Yeah. And when you're 10, it's like that's the first time you start having friends. And so I told everybody at my school, come over to my house. We're having a Raiders of the Lost Ark birthday party. Mm-hmm. And my mom was there, and now I'm like a parent, and I'm looking back, and I realize like, oh, we didn't have any money, really. Like we weren't really that. We really didn't have any money,
Yeah.
And now I'm remembering like the look that my mom had in her eyes of like this, oh my God, my son just said we're having a Raiders of the Lost Ark birthday party, and I said, yeah, there's going to be a Raiders of the Lost Ark cake. Mm-hmm. And now there's all this copyright stuff that you have to do when you go to get a cake. You can't just go in and get an R2D2 cake. That's like there's like that's a fee. Like you have to. George gets a cut of that cake, literally. But so it came the big day, and I was so amped about the cake. I was like, what's it going to be like? Is it going to be like the Ark, with figures kind of like lifting it up and stuff like that? And so I'll never forget this moment of my mom, and she's really beautiful then and young and in my memory, and her turning around and do you remember those? Have you ever made like a pancake? It was like in a rectangle pan, and it was kind of a real country way to make a cake. It was cheap. You just kind of make it down, and then you flip it over, and you pat the cake, and then you just get some real basic frosting on it. Mm-hmm. So she turns around with me and like my handful of 10-year-olds with this kind of smile and a shrug, and saying, "Happy birthday, son." And on this cake was this. Do you have this?
Yes, I have one of those.
Okay, so
I love it.
It was wrapped. It was wrapped in Saran wrap and placed on the cake, right? And I was just like, wow, And she goes, well, Craig, you can lift it up if you'd like, and I lifted it up, and there's frosting all over it, and I remember like licking it, and I took all the plastic wrapping off, and I don't know, do any of you know what this is? Are there any like Raider? How many of you had one of these? Wow. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. This book kind of rocked my dome, right? I open it up. First of all, it's called Raiders of the Lost Ark: The Illustrated Screenplay. And it starts off with a note from this guy named Steven Spielberg, right? And he gives a little like talk about, you know, all the different countries that they went into. But then you get into it, and it's all the storyboards from the movie. And so me and my boys, you know, we're just sitting around like, look at that, look at that, look at that. You know, oh yeah, that's the part where he said stay out of light, you know. And you know, and then we get to the moment. I love it too. Right here, hey, the boulder. Remember the rolling boulder? And then later they all went home, you know. And I was just going through this thing, and I was just looking at the pictures, and then suddenly, like, I'm realizing that this book doesn't really read like everything else that, you know, exterior, South America, high jungle, day, mountain peak against sky in dense, lush rainforest filled with the varied sounds of the jungle. Ragged, jutting canyon walls are half hidden by thick mist. And this is the first screenplay that I ever read. And so I just kept on studying it. And then, and so this is 81, right? So then this came out.
Yeah.
Okay, now this is a find. It's on YouTube, so you kids can see it. But it's this making of Raiders of the Lost Ark. How many of you have seen this? Go on YouTube tonight. It's really, really cool. And so now I'm seeing the magic.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, there's this whole, because I was now at school, and this is back, there were these things, those of you kids here, there's these things called encyclopedias when we were growing up. Yeah, and they didn't have Google. you couldn't Google the Ark of the Covenant, but man, I was grabbing you know, and looking up Ark of the Covenant, because I was gonna find it.
I was always trying to find a Bible that had illustrations as good as the Ralph McQuarrie.
With the fire coming out,
that
right?
Blew my mind.
And so I was like researching everything, and I came home, and I remember telling my dad, like, well, I'm going to be an archaeologist, obviously. You know, I'm gonna do what Indiana Jones did. I'm gonna jump on trucks and get relics and everything like that. And then I saw this movie, right? And I'm seeing this little skinny guy, like, going like, okay, and then this is going to happen. And then, Harrison, you're going to climb up this thing, and you're going to do this and everything. And then he's doing that. And then the skinny guy, who's Steven Spielberg, he's doing the scene where Miriam is doing the drinks. And he's talking to her and getting her all excited. And she finishes a take. And I was so in love with Miriam. I mean, she was just like, you know, you grow up, and I hear women, you kind of like, you either fall in love with Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. You know, you kind of have your you know, and then there's kind of like the Ginger and Marianne for. She was just like Marianne, you know. She was like the freckles, and I fell hard for Miriam. And the skinny guy, Steven Spielberg, he's like, do the scene, and she does the scene, and he goes, that's great, and she kisses him. I don't know if you remember. He's like, "Oh, that's great," and he just takes Mary and Karen out, and then, mwah! And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! I want to be that guy. You know, I want to tell people what to do and
be kissed for,
and be kissed for, right?
That's great."
But then it goes into everything, and I got to be honest. Like, I was a little worried watching this. I mean, like, I heard that Steven wasn't going to like change anything in the movie, but I would see things like they would say, well, we dug a long trench, and that's how we drug the guy under the truck so it wouldn't hurt him all that much. We put up a glass partition, even though.
Well, I mean, my thing is.
Did you see the reflection of that Cobra? Because I didn't see. You saw
it?
it?
Yeah, no, it was.
Did you see the reflection of the Cobra?
On the third Cobra, there's a reflection off to the side very lightly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so he's totally off the hook. He did.
I think the one moment that's different is when the car goes off the side. I think they did a digital extension of the car going down.
When the guy goes, and they go off?
Yeah, they go off the cliff. I think that has been changed slightly, but I don't know.
And then it went from this to
Michael Jackson's Thriller.
To this. Yeah. Okay, so I was like really big into Michael Jackson's Thriller. And then this video came out, which is called The Making of Michael Jackson's Thriller. And that's where I learned at a very young age who John Landis was. And he starts talking about, this is back in the days where you rented videos.
They actually played that the day Thriller debuted on MTV.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
'cause
really.
that's
By the way,
where I
if you
first saw it. Was
if
on
you haven't
MTV.
seen it,
Yeah.
see it. It's actually really, really good. But it was really kind of funny because I'm sitting there and my dad is like, "Oh yeah, we should see these John Landis movies." And one was American Werewolf in London, and we got a double bill, and he didn't think anything of it. He got American Werewolf in London and this other movie called Kentucky Fried Movie. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there with my auntie EO and everybody, and we're watching Kentucky Fried Movie because Michael Jackson said to get it, so I did. But these two movies, but more so Raiders, just I mean, I love the movie, but I loved that it was the first time that I knew that people made a movie.
Well, I mean, the thing is that Raiders VHS, the making of, I mean, for a lot of the generations today, they really, I don't know if they fully appreciate how awesome it is that on so many films we have a wealth of behind-the-scenes information. We only got making ofs of Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not a lot else, really. I mean,
really
and if you found anything, you'd had to go to like a comic convention somewhere and go to that guy who had all those illegal tapes, where he had connections in Hollywood to people. He says, "You got to see this shit," right? And it was amazing stuff. Like you'd see the making of Road Warrior, and they had it, and it was some Australian TV thing, and that's where I was getting that stuff. So I was like, I don't know, I was an addict. I got every Dad totally supported me and like showed me everything. I mean, by the time I saw Raiders, I was already like, I could tell watching the movie that whoever made this movie loved Adventures of Robin Hood for the use of shadows.
Right.
And the last shot was Citizen Kane, which Dad showed me when I was like 5.
Yeah.
And explained to me the full significance of it. It's so I had a sort of bizarre film appreciation brain from a very early age.
I just remember when they were opening up the pit.
Yeah.
At night, I was terrified. I mean, I really was. I had no idea what I was going to see down there. And they're building up those awesome clouds that, like, they used in Poltergeist a lot, where they kind of put the ink in the water, type of thing.
Who here sent me that Damon Lindelof essay that he wrote? Is that person still here or no? No? Okay, so one of you, but obviously not anyone that's here, sent me, he was like, "I'm not a writer. I really want to see Raiders of the Lost Ark in IMAX, but here's a writer I really like and what he had to say about it." And Damon Lindelof, the guy who did Lost and all that, Star Trek and a bunch of stuff, he wrote this essay that I couldn't get out of my mind as I was watching the end of the movie, because there's the scene where Indy and Marion are tied to the post, and he's telling Marion, "Shut your eyes, don't look at it, no matter what." And Damon in his essay goes, "In the first 8 times I saw that movie, every time Indy said that, I'd be like," and I'd hear Nazi screaming and yells, and I was just terrified. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, "I gotta see," and it'd be a shot of Indy going, he's like, "Oh shit, yeah, and that's what I love about this film, is that, even the most sophisticated sort of, I'm a super genius writer in Hollywood, when he saw this movie, the thing that he latched onto was that Indy was scared of the big Nazi.
Right.
Just like he was afraid of the big Nazi. Like, the thing that, the childhood films that we had growing up didn't necessarily have to have a kid for us to associate with, because the main characters were who we wanted to be.
Right.
And everything they felt, that's the magic of this film, is Indy, Harrison Ford's acting in this is extraordinarily subtle and brilliant. And
nobody gets the hell beat out of him like Harrison Ford. You realize that? Like, he relishes in it. Like, there's just something about the way he gets thrown around, and it somehow humanizes him in a way where you root for him.
Yeah.
You just root for him.
No, watching this film, how many people here saw the shot-for-shot remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark at the Alamo Drafthouse?
Well, I've seen it online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's...
Do you know what it is?
wish...
It's like these kids who kind of like over like a decade?
Yeah, it was like in Mississippi.
Yeah.
And from the moment they saw the film, like Craig and I saw this film, they're basically the exact same age as us, except their entire childhood was trying to recreate it with their video camera. And they did stuff like, I put it on at this thing, and next thing you know, there's a boulder running down a child, and you know the monkey doing the stick out, you know that. They didn't have a monkey, but they have a little white dog that they tied a string to his paw to, and so the dog's on the shoulder, and he goes, arf, arf, you know, like it's the most brilliant moment in the thing. But they did the submarine, they did everything, and the thing that I loved about that film is I realized, my God, what a capture of childhood. That if I mean, everybody I know that loved Raiders of the Lost Ark that wanted to become a filmmaker as a result would shoot little shorts. They'd never try to recreate the whole thing.
Yeah, I never made movies of it. I would just act them out. I had a black dog leash for my German Shepherd, and I found duct tape, and I just wrapped it around the little thing that you connected to it. And I found a hat, and for Halloween, I was Indiana Jones, and I totally geeked out.
There was this awesome kid, I believe he's somewhere here still. He had a jump rope whip, and he was like whipping it over there, and the whole end of it was all frayed. And I was giving away hats. You can see a few people wearing the hats and stuff.
Saw the hat.
And they came with a whip, and there he is in the back, and dressed as Indy. And I was like, but you already got the outfit. And he's like, I don't have a whip. I got a jump rope. You know, it's like, here's your whip and hat. You know, it's like, nah. This is just, I don't know. This is a movie that feels like what the dream of movie making was supposed to be. You know, like it would be more fun to make Raiders of the Lost Ark than any other movie, other than, I don't know.
Now, when you're a filmmaker, they say that you're supposed to watch Hearts of Darkness, which is this documentary about the making of Apocalypse Now. So
but that puts you off of making film.
Well, no, but it makes you feel better. Like there's times that, like for me, like I'd be covered in sweat and blood and mosquito repellent in Mississippi making a movie, and you just want to watch something so you can see somebody great like Francis Ford Coppola suffer
more.
And,
yeah.
You know, but I mean, it's. God, where did I go with that? Where did I start with that? I got off.
They say to watch Hearts of Darkness.
So there's this moment in Raiders, in the making of Raiders, where there's this whole scene where Steven Spielberg is doing this bit with Sallah, where you see all the Nazis at this table, and the Nazis are getting in an argument with Sallah, and they go to punch Sallah, and he raises a pan, and the Nazi hits the pan, and he goes, that's it. And you hear Steven Spielberg go, cut. And they're wearing those hats. Remember those like baseball caps, but they had like the neck protectors. It was like a hat mullet. You know what I mean?
It was a hat mullet.
Yeah,
yes.
and so you see Spielberg and George Lucas bearded and in blazing heat, and they say cut, and you see Steven Spielberg, and he's so happy. He's like, that was great. And then the cinematographer comes over. No, the smoke, it went right in front of the lens. It's no good. It's no good. And you see Steven go, okay, but you don't understand. If I reshoot this scene, then I go half a day over schedule. And there's this long pause, and he turns to George Lucas, and George goes, we got to move on. And he goes, all right, moving on. And Steven Spielberg's walking away, and he says, sometimes there's days where I think I'm making the greatest movie of all time. And then there's other days where I think I'm making an absolute disaster. And I sometimes say that as a mantra, because I mean there really are moments where you're like, I'm making the greatest movie ever, and then usually my wife will get a call mid-shoot where it's like I've made a terrible mistake. I should never have done this. But to see Steven Spielberg with a movie that is for all intents and purposes, a classic. Having that much doubt, and you see him, I mean, like you think, well, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, what, go a half a day over schedule. Yeah. But they couldn't on this movie. This movie is actually, and when you watch it, it's like there's not many effects, and I mean, not any like digital effects or special effects, but but the stunts, I mean, it's all really tight. Like, it was right after Spielberg had made, I think, 1941, and he went really overboard. But he really needed, as much as, you know, George sometimes gets, you know, raked over the coals for, you know, his ideas of money and repackaging things. Like, he was really kind of firm with Steven Spielberg, saying, like, no, you cannot do what you did on 1941. I mean, this is a good friend and a successful filmmaker, and he's saying, like, I'm in charge of the money, and you need to be on budget and on schedule. And this is Steven Spielberg, you know, and I think that there's something really, it's good for you to have those limitations. And every time Spielberg made a move forward, it's because he put limitations on himself. Like, I think on Schindler's List, he was like, I'm not going to do all my dolly, those Spielbergian push-ins, unless there is a true reason. I will only dolly if somebody moves. You know, and people, he's like, I'm not going to do jibs, I'm not going to do cranes on Schindler's List. And you'd think to yourself, it's like, yeah, but you're Steven Spielberg, you can really do whatever you want. But he really was operating on a higher level if there were these restrictions. Okay, one more thing for fans. Jaws. Have you seen Jaws? I think you can take...
We have a few people that say it's their favorite film, but more people that say Raiders is.
Well, that's close.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. But if you... There's a scene in Raiders that I think you could teach a semester on. And it's when Brody comes over and says, they want you to go for it. Go home and watch the DVD or the VHS or whatever, your iPod. And you'll notice that whole scene takes place in one continuous take, except for the final moment where he goes, you know what kind of a cautious guy I am, and he takes out the gun and he throws it in the suitcase. But all this camera work is happening very subtly, and like, for instance, they walk in and they're both in a profile shot, and the camera's looking at both Brody and no, not Brody. Professor?
Brody.
Yeah, I got mixed up on Jaws.
Marcus,
right? Marcus and
Marcus
Indy, right? And then Indy goes and the camera pans with it, and he's going to pack, and then Marcus goes to sit, and Indy takes a suitcase and comes right into a close-up. They didn't cut to a close-up. He comes into a close-up, and then there's this great pause, and it's kind of like what I call like a soap opera thing, where it's like you got a guy or a girl behind you looking at you, and you've got your back to them, so they can both be honest with their expressions. And what does Indy say? You think she'll be there? Well, I imagine she will be. And the music kind of comes in, and then the camera pushes in on Marcus, saying, like, you know, it's just nothing you've ever really gone after before. It's all in one continuous take. And if you watch Jaws, my favorite moment in Jaws is the same kind of staging, and you can really be aware of camera movement if you watch it at 1.5 speed. You can really see the tricks that are slow. And there's this moment when Richard Dreyfuss comes into this little shack where Roy Scheider is talking on the phone, and it's kind of the first time they officially meet. All one continuous take, but the movements of the actors, they're very subtle, but they're giving these close-ups and wide shots without cutting to a close-up or wide shot. And that's when you talked about Citizen Kane, if you watch Citizen Kane, that happens all the time. And Spielberg was so influenced by Citizen Kane. And
the last shot is the last shot.
And the last thing is, and I leaned over to Harry, if ever you watch after the truck scene, it's my favorite moment, and it's so small. After the truck scene, you know, the truck scene, the big truck chase, then the Nazi guys and Belloc, they come into that little courtyard, and they stop their car, and the one skinny Nazi that his face melted off, he picks up a melon. And if you watch just him, like everybody usually watches Belloc, but if you watch this guy, there's a dog barking. You hear this, and he grabs the melon, and he throws it, and you hear this. It's so small, it cracks me up every time I see it. I can watch that over and over and over again. That's funny.
The brilliance of this film is that they're so. I mean, I was watching. I can't believe it's already over.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I went to the bathroom desperately and came back, and I was like, oh my God, we're already in China. How the hell did that happen? Like, ugh.
Didn't you hate the monkey? When I was a kid, I was so mad at the monkey.
Oh, I thought the monkey got his just deserves. Like,
He
but
did, but he betrayed
made me
Miriam.
want to have a monkey my entire life.
He betrayed my girl.
But
he's dead to me.
But think
He's
about
dead
what
to
the
me.
monkey represented to the guy with the eye patch.
Right.
Okay, because the guy with the eye patch, that monkey was his loyal fucking pet. He trained that monkey, and that monkey was like, apparently he could talk to the monkey. The monkey.
It was
and the guy goes off to tell the Nazis, "Oh my God,
the
this is
Rancor in Return of the Jedi."
Yeah.
You know, the
totally.
big fat guy that comes out after the Rancor has the. He's like, yeah, the monkey is the Rancor of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Exactly. I love it. Craig,
thank you so much for
having me.
having me.
What other movies can we show to bring you into town?
Everything you want.
Keep watching Ain't It Cool. We'll have more events coming up. I hope to do more like this. I love it when I bring in filmmakers who just love a film with us all.